Hey kids, Mr. Fly here, hope you're well, and welcome to another bike news. This one is part one of the May bike news. If you're interested in what's been going on in the motorcycling world here in the UK for the last month, then stick around and stay tuned, loads of stories to get through. Okay, as ever, loads of stories to get through, so grab yourself a brew and settle down because this may go on for a bit. And this is part one of two. I shall post this one up on Thursday, and then part two will probably go up on Saturday. Anyway, right, part one then. Let's crack on with this first paper. And the first story that I've pulled out here from MCN. Rocket takes off is the headline, and this is the much long awaited bike that I'm personally very excited to learn about. The new Rocket 3 Triumph Factory Custom. Now, this is a bike that Triumph have been teasing us with for ages now, haven't they? They've shown us pictures of it. We've known it's coming, and we think there's a new production version of the bike coming as well. In fact, we know there is, and probably more on that later on in the review. But the Triumph Factory Custom is the first bike to actually officially break cover, and they have now, at the beginning of this month, actually given us the first real specs before we'd just been guessing about what the specs might be. So basically what they've come up with is a 2,458cc motorcycle, so basically a 2.5 litre bike, the biggest production motorcycle engine currently available, just absolutely massive. 167 brake horsepower, which is a big number in itself, but the real big one is 163 foot-pound of torque. This thing is going to be a torque monster. No surprise there, but off the line, this is just going to be a nuts bike. No figure, interestingly, on weight yet, and that's the thing that would be interesting for me, because of course that engine is massive, and I'm sure it'll be you know, a low seat height, so you can get your feet on the deck and feel quite comfortable on it, but it is going to be a heavy old bike, and for me, weight is a big thing. I'm not a particularly big chap. I absolutely love the look of this bike, but if it's way too heavy, that might be a game changer for me. But anyway, Triumph of course know that sort of thing. The old bike was pretty heavy. I have heard rumours that this is going to be lighter than the old bike, even though it's got a bigger engine. Let's hope that's true. Let's hope it comes in at a reasonable figure. I imagine it will still be over 300 kilograms though, but we'll wait and see. I don't know what that is yet. The price of the Triumph Factory Custom, 25 grand, so that puts it out of my league for sure. A real shame. I'm not sure who's going to have 25 grand to spend on one of these. There are some rich bikers out there. I'm sure they'll fly off the shelves. In fact, I heard that they're already all sold. I'm not sure, but personally, I'm waiting for the production version of the bike, of which more later in the review. But what a beautiful looking machine. Really looking forward now to seeing how that does. Oh, by the way, the TFC version, there's only going to be 750 of those made as well, so a limited edition as well. But what a beautiful bike, and for me, this is one of the most exciting bikes I've seen in the last couple of years probably. There aren't that many bikes that come across that I think, oh, I really want one of them, but this, I do really want one. So we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. I think it's going to be a while before the production ones come in at a price that is appealing to me. Okay, that's the first one. Second story here. In fact, being a bit self-indulgent here, because it's my own blog off article. Once a month I write a brief article for MCN. It's called Blog Off, and this particular one I pulled out because it's a subject I've not covered here on the YouTube channel before. MCN have entitled it "Big Mileage Rides Are Just Dangerous." That's not a title I gave it, and not necessarily the sense that I want to give of this article, but I'll be interested to see what your thoughts are on doing big mileage days. What I've argued in the article is that for me, if you just go out to ride for massive miles for the sake of it, that's not fun. Now, occasionally I've had to go out and do big miles because, you know, if you want to get, do a tour of Scotland or something, I have to ride up to Scotland to start with. I'm necessarily going to have to hit the, M40 or M1, M6, do some motorways. They're boring and tedious just to knock the miles off. Or if you're going to the Alps or something, you're likely to hit motorways to get through France. You don't always have to do that, by the way, of course. There are some great roads to hit in between times if you've got the time. Anyway, my point is on those big miles rides that I've done, and I personally, I don't think I've ever done more than about 400 miles in one hit. I find the bits on motorways very, very soporific. Makes me want to go to sleep. And I have, on more than one occasion, I'm ashamed to admit, found myself waking up from what's called a micro sleep in the in lane 3, the outside lane, the overtaking lane of a motorway. And I tell you, that is not funny when you sort of come round and you realise you're on your motorcycle doing 70 miles an hour. So for me, big miles rides, I think, are a bit dangerous. I know some people love doing them. I know there's the Iron Butt Society that just goes out to do as many miles as possible. I personally think there's no fun in that for me, and also think it is a little bit dangerous, but I understand that some people like it. I know my mate Bruce Smart of Teapot One, he loves doing big miles just for the heck of it, and that's fine. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but there are ways about doing it to make it a bit safer. If you go, in fact, to the Iron Butt website, they do give you some hints and tips as to how to make it safe. But just interested in the comments below as to what your thoughts are on doing big miles on a bike in a day? What's the maximum mileage you've ever done? And do you think it was a wise idea? Anyway, that was the reason for pointing out that one. Just something we haven't discussed here on the Mr. and Fly before. Wonder what your views were. Okay, next story that I've picked out here then. Tab number 3. Mutt's latest is Sweet 17 is the headline here, and this is a new 125cc motorcycle from Mutt. This is one of these Chinese built bikes or Chinese components, and then built, I think in the case of Mutt, they're assembled in Birmingham, and various components swapped out as well for slightly better ones. I love the look of these little bikes, but there is the problem. They are little bikes. They only seem to come in 125cc machines. It's not just Mutt that make these, there are all sorts of others as well. I've reviewed a few on the channel. I think they look great. There is room for 125cc motorcycles in the market, of course, for people just starting out. Then 125 is the way to go. But once you've passed your test, 125cc, I would argue, isn't quite enough if you want to do you know, general riding on the roads. I would argue that 250cc almost is enough. As somebody that owns a 250cc motorcycle, my Honda CRF is a 250, you rarely need more than that power when you're just road riding. Occasionally it would be handy to have a bit more poke to overtake. So actually I think the sweet spot is probably somewhere near a 400cc if you want a bike that'll do everything. But my point is, 250cc on one of these retro Chinese bikes, I think they would absolutely fly off the shelves. I suspect there are some reasons to do with things like Euro 4 compliance that means that importers in this country don't want to do a 250cc, because there is definitely 250cc versions of these engines available. But I think once you move on to 250cc and certain power outputs, you then have to move away from things like linked brakes and put ABS on. That brings the price up, and other bits and pieces like that. So it's a shame, because I think, you know, if these manufacturers could just move up to 250cc. There are one or two that do, by the way. For example, Bullet, which is an odd manufacturer. I think they're French-based. They make some stunning-looking bikes. I follow them on Instagram, and they're constantly posting pictures of their bikes. They're absolutely lovely looking. But unfortunately, they're very hard to get hold of in the UK. I've never ridden one. I've asked them if I can ride one, and they've just not been able to get me one, which is a real shame, because they are 250cc, and I think would be blooming brilliant. Anyway, so I'm not homing in on just Mutt, but all these Chinese manufacturers, if you can find a way, or Chinese importers, I should say, the UK companies that produce them, if you can find a way to do the 250cc bike, do it. I think you'll be onto a winner. Again, wonder what your views are on that. All right, moving on. Next story. A letter here from somebody called Jason, who sent in a letter on Talking Point in MCN to Motorcycle News, all about the Yamaha Nikkhun. Now, this is the three-wheeled bike. Curious thing, that came out last year. I actually rode this a couple of weeks ago, and I've got a review in the can. I've yet to publish. It'll be coming out soon of this very bike. I drew some conclusions of my own in that review, so stay tuned to the channel if you want to watch that. And I don't want to give you all my conclusions here, but Jason, the point he's made, and then MCN made this their star letter, is basically what is the point of having three wheels on a, quote, motorcycle? And it's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. When I rode it, I must say, I agree with all the other reviews that I've read or seen on YouTube, that you do feel like the front end has an awful lot of grip. So it's nice in that respect. But what I didn't get is, why would you have that over a motorcycle? If you're an already existing motorcyclist, or you've passed your test, you've moved on to bigger bikes, which by default you have to, because this is based on the MT09, so it's got the triple engine out of that, the 900-ish cc motor, so you're going to need a full license to ride it. Why would you have this rather than two wheels? Not sure. So there is definitely a big novelty factor here. It's fun to ride. I did enjoy it, but would I buy one? Probably not. So it's interesting to see who exactly is this bike aimed at. I'll be interested to hear from you who you think might buy this bike. Are you interested in it? Have you bought one? Because one thing I do notice, even though there was an awful lot of furore about these bikes when they came out, because, you know, hats off to Yamaha for producing something different. You know, great that they've done that. But it was all over the press when it came out a year ago. Everybody raved about it, but how many have you seen on the road? Personally, I saw my first one in the wild only yesterday, and that was as I headed into High Wycombe, which is the local town to me where the local Yamaha dealer is. I got a sneaking suspicion the one I saw on the road might be the very demo bike that I rode a few weeks before. So I haven't seen many around. That was the first one, as I say, I've seen in the wild. Have you seen any about? They have been on the on that cycle race, haven't they? The Giro d'Italia or whatever. I don't follow cycling, but people have told me about them being in there. And they're being used as camera platforms, presumably because they're perceived as stable. So that might be one use for them, but my goodness me, that's a small market, isn't it? So anyway, what do you think about the Nikkhun now it's been out for a while? Is this a bike for you? Who's going to buy them? Don't know. All right, next one. Next story in this paper. Story number 4. One of these reviews that MCN do occasionally, which I really like, where they pit two bikes together. They've been titled this When Biking Worlds Collide, and they've put together the Triumph Bonneville Speed Twin, 10,500 quid, against the BMW RnineT Pure Sport, 10,930. So best part of 11 grand, these bikes. These are sort of retro style modern bikes. I'm lucky enough in that I have ridden both of these and I love them both. And for me, it would be quite difficult if I had that sort of money to spend on a retro bike at the moment. Which one would I go for? Because they are both beautiful. The Triumph, I think, well, definitely feels much more refined than the RnineT. The Triumph feels like a modern bike. It's smooth, everything works, it's a beautiful ride. But on the other hand, you could argue it's a little bit soulless in comparison to the RnineT, which, because it has that boxer engine, has a bit more rock and roll, and it's the previous boxer engine as well. It's the old proper air oil cooled one, not the water cooled or liquid cooled one. And it, you know, it does rumble and vibrate. It feels a bit more genuine as a retro, but still very much a, you know, a modern bike. It goes well, it stops well. So depends what you value, I guess, out of your retro, whether you want something that just looks retro but rides very thoroughly modern, or whether you want something that feels a bit retro as well as looks retro. Anyway, lots of the use of the word retro there. I was trying to stop doing that. Anyway, let's look at the conclusion that MCN came to. We come to the conclusion of that one. Here we go, MCN verdict. They gave the Triumph Speed Twin 4 out of 5, and they gave the BMW RnineT Pure Sport 4 out of 5 as well. A dead heat, you might think. But when you read the write-up by Phil West, who's one of my favourite MCN journalists, he's actually said that the Triumph was the clear winner. On what basis, I hear you say? They're basically saying because it just does everything better than the RnineT, and I agree. You know, it is smoother. It does feel the more refined of the two bikes. But of course, you know, part of the charm of a retro, I think, is the way it feels, the way it makes you feel. If you want to feel like you're riding an old bike, actually the RnineT is, you know, with its rock and roll, is possibly the one to go for. I'm not too sure. I mean, I already own a boxer powered motorcycle in the form of my R1200GS, so if I were to choose between the two, I might be tempted to go for the Triumph, just because I'm not, despite everything you might think, I'm not a massive fan of the boxer engine. In the case of the GS, it works a treat because it keeps the weight low, and it means a big old adventure bike, somebody who's not that big like me, can actually manhandle it. It feels very light when you're moving the bike around, and I love that about the GS, or the big GS, not the smaller ones. They feel heavy. So I'm not sure I want another boxer powered bike. You kind of, they're a bit Marmite, aren't they? You either love them or hate them. I actually, surprisingly, I sort of fall more, I think, into the hate them version. I don't quite like the way they look with the cylinders sticking out. But all that said, I do love the RnineT, so I'm being completely contrary here. You've got to go for the one you like the look of, the best. I'm completely split between them. I don't know which way I would go. The RnineT, a little bit more expensive, arguably a bit more of a classy bike. When you put the two together, the RnineT just feels a bit more of a special bike, I think. The Triumph feels a little bit maybe like it's trying to try too hard. Some of the things about the new Triumphs I'm not so keen on. The fact that, you know, they try to make the fuel injection look like carburetors, stuff like that. I don't think the Speed Twin does too much of that, but there's just something a little bit fake feeling about some of these new Triumphs, even though I do love them, don't get me wrong. I love all the retro bikes. Anyway, difficult one. I think if you're in that market, go for whichever one you like the look of best. Anyway, that was it for the stories from the first paper. On to the next one. Okay, so to the second paper for the review, or for part one of the review anyway. And the first story I've picked out here, British MotoGP future secured. Silverstone confirmed full circuit resurface, a new deal to 2021. Now, do you remember last year the absolute fiasco that was the British MotoGP Grand Prix? I actually went along. It rained an awful lot, and there was standing water on the track that had been resurfaced. And basically, long story short, they ended up having to cancel the Grand Prix because there was just too much water on the track, and it was going to be dangerous to race. It was embarrassing for Silverstone. It was a bit embarrassing for the UK generally, not being able to hold a GP. Absolutely nuts. Anyway, long story short, the company that laid that track was Aggregate Industries. They've now been given the bullet, surprise, surprise, and a new company brought in, Tarmac, and they're going to relay the surface. I don't know what the financial situation is. Presumably some insurance kicked in or something like that, or maybe even Aggregate paying some penalties. I don't know what the business setup of this is, but the good news is Tarmac are coming in. Dorna, the MotoGP rights holders, if you like, have said yes, it can continue. We're happy to give Silverstone a go again, and it's been secured until at least 2021, so that's amazing. Michelin have got involved as well to test their tyres on the new surface. It's going to be done around about August time apparently, which is just as well, because I think the Grand Prix is in August, isn't it? Yeah, it is. So it's got to be done pretty soon. But thank goodness that it's going to be resurfaced again. Let's hope that they learn the lessons, whatever they are, from what happened before, and Tarmac do a good job of this one. They just, Silverstone just cannot afford, can they, to for anything to go wrong with this Grand Prix. There's a picture down here, Tarmac laying test sections of the asphalt at Silverstone, so they're obviously doing some pre-tests as well, which is good news. So thumbs up to Silverstone for cracking on with that, and great news that the MotoGP stays there. All right, next story I pulled out here. Storming Stafford's sale. Now, you may remember, if you've been a long-term viewer of the channel, I think in the last bike news, or possibly the one before, I talked about Bud Ekin's Triumph. It's a TR6 SS trophy that was going up for auction. And the thing about this bike is that this is the bike that Bud Ekin's owned when he did the stunts for The Great Escape. So when he did that very famous jump that looked like Steve McQueen was doing over the fence on the Swiss border, it was actually Bud Ekin's that did that jump. And at the time, he owned this particular bike. This isn't the bike that he did the jump on. This is just the bike he had back in the garage. So that's the amazing thing about it. Or I thought that was quite amusing. It's not even the bike that appears in the film or pretends to be, but it's the bike he owned. Anyway, it went up for auction a month ago. The estimates for the bike, given it is an old bike, was between £20,000 and £30,000. It actually went for £85,000. Can you believe that? £85,000 for a Triumph TR6 SS trophy owned by Bud Ekin's. My word, that is an expensive old Triumph, isn't it? But a lovely bike, but yeah, 85 grand, incredible. So just thought I'd give you an update on that if you wondered how that one went. Right, next story, this is quite exciting. Little Duke for grown-up folk. Now, this is the KTM 390 Duke, which is probably one of my favourite KTMs. In fact, if not my favourite KTM. I borrowed one of these a year or so ago. I had it for a few weeks, and I really, really liked it because this is, again, one of those bikes, the 390cc engine or thereabouts is just in that sweet spot. It's got proper power for the road. You can overtake with it, you can have fun with it, but you can ride it to its limits on the road, and you're not going to get into any terrible danger. Well, if you're sort of sensible anyway. And I think it looks cute as well. I really, really love the 390 Duke. I think out of all the KTMs I've ridden, and I think I've ridden most of them, the 390 Duke and the Super Duke are definitely my favourites, both in the riding and the looks front. And I think out of all of them, the little 390 Duke probably pips the big Super Duke just for overall value for money and fun factor. It's just a hoot to ride this bike. The one thing I possibly didn't like about it, and especially as I'm not a particularly big fella, the bike seemed a little bit small. So something KTM are doing are actually, we've got some spy shots here, they've actually produced a version of the bike with a bigger frame. So that's great news if you're a slightly bigger person. So not sure when we're going to see it. Looking at the article here, it's saying, can't see when it's likely to come out, but it's a little way off yet, they're saying. Oh, here we go. Go on sale likely early 2021. It's still at the early stages of development, but it's got basically a bigger frame. They're speculating that the power may be up slightly. It's got new seating on it. It's got pillion pegs that's still to be decided apparently, so they're looking at the positioning of them. It already had the high-tech TFT and Bluetooth integration. All that is already a very up-to-date bike, the 390. So going to be interesting to see what that's like when that one comes out. If it comes out in 2021, I might have to go to my friends at KTM and ask them to borrow one again, because I really like the 390. Difficult to improve upon, I think. If they manage it, it's going to be a really fun bike, that. So really excited to see that one coming out. Okay, next story here, and it's another letter from Talking Point, the MCN letters page, and this is called Trouser Trauma. Now, this is an interesting letter from somebody called Paul Evans, or an email he sent in, and he talks about where he basically went and bought himself a new pair of jeans on his bike. He went and bought himself some fancy new Dragon jeans, and the problem he had was, how does he carry them home? And this is the problem you always have if you ride to a bike supplier, aren't they? Anyway, what he ended up doing was going to a cheap outdoor shop, bought himself a cheap sort of 10 quid rucksack or whatever, so he could just pop them in the back, and off he went home. Now, the issue he had was when he was ripping along the M4, unfortunately the rucksack came undone, spilling the contents of the rucksack, including the jeans, which incredibly got wrapped around the swing arm and the chain and the wheel. What a nightmare. Luckily, nothing terrible happened to him. He survived to tell the tale, but you can imagine that could cause a massive accident, and you know, you could really help yourself in those situations. So Paul has sent me this email in, and I'm giving it to you to spread the word as a sort of a public service announcement. If you are going to wear a rucksack, make sure, ideally it's a proper bike one, or put the zips so that they're at the side rather than at the top, so they don't work themselves open. You know, if they move at all, it's going to be difficult for them to move at all if they're on the side. And basically, just be careful. Just think about things potentially catching around your wheels if they were to fall out, because disaster could be there. So yeah, the two lessons he learned are don't use cheap backpacks, and when using a backpack, don't pull the zips to the centre, pull them to the side. So just good advice there if you ever ride with a backpack. And let's face it, most of us do, I think, from time to time. Okay, next story here. Game changer. BMW say the new S1000RR is faster, lighter and easier to control. But is this 205 brake horsepower scalpel just too sharp for the road? Well, I've never ridden this bike yet. It looks, I think, incredible. BMW, as I've mentioned before on this bike news review, have done a great job in bringing the looks up to date. It's no longer that horrible asymmetric front end. It looks brilliant. I rode the old bike back in 2017, so it's been a while since I've ridden one of these. I think this new one looks brilliant, and the old one rode fantastic. My only complaint was it was maybe a bit too good, but this one looks great. And I had an email the other day, a sort of a general mail from BMW saying that I think there's some sort of launch event this Saturday at BMW dealers around this, so I must get onto my local dealer and find out if they've got one of these on demo. I assume they have if they're doing a launch, and see if I can possibly go and borrow it and do a first ride on it in the next few weeks. So hopefully I'll be able to ride it fairly soon if they're getting in the dealers now. But anyway, what was the verdict that MCN had over the bike? Let's have a look. Now the rider of this was John Urry. Again, one of the top testers, and he said that the bike was a 5 out of 5 stars. It's very rare that MCN give anything 5 out of 5. 16,700 quid is the bike, or the one they rode, 16,920, so 17 grand bike that they rode. And he's basically saying that it's super refined, excuse me, full of low end grunt. You can treat it like a sports tourer and ride it in its low rev range, or you can use it as a scalpel and a weapon. So basically something of everyone in a sports bike, and that's kind of what I'm expecting the bike to be like myself, I must admit. It's even got a cruise control, so you know, you could use it as a sports tourer. Incredible looking bit of kit, really looking forward to riding it, but 205 brake horsepower. This is the opposite, the antithesis of those smaller bikes I was talking about earlier. For me, this is too much for the road. There's no excuse for a bike of this power on the road. If you're a track day fiend, if you love going to track days and you can only have one motorcycle, then of course get this, enjoy it on the track. But on the road, in my view, there's no place for bikes like this. This is just too much power to be responsible on the road. When you ride it, and again, maybe I shouldn't be so scathing because I haven't ridden it yet, but I suspect the temptation to open this up will be huge. I don't think I've ever ridden a sports bike that I haven't felt like I need to open up every time I ride it, and that's one of the reasons why I don't ride my own sports bike that much, because you know, maybe I'm just getting old and a boring old devil, but I just think there's too much power for the road. As I've said many times before, so much more fun riding a small bike to the limits of its ability than riding a big bike just touching the surface of its ability on the road. So there we go. Anyway, all that notwithstanding, I love the looks of sports bikes, and I love the look of this. It's up there with the R1 and the Panigale as far as I'm concerned for looks. Looking forward to giving that one a go when I can possibly get hold of one. Okay, and then last but not least for part one of the bike review is this, Living on the Edge. Now this is the new Indian FTR1200S, the flat tracker. The reason why I've pulled this out is not because of this bike particularly, but just something I've noticed with sort of trends in motorcycling in the last year. You know how trends come and go, don't they? So there were sports bikes, then there are adventure bikes. Sort of we're in a bit of a scrambler phase at the moment. I think the flat tracker might be the next phase that's coming our way. And I personally welcome that because I think these look great. They're something about flat trackers. I'm not entirely sure what defines a flat tracker, other than it's made for going on flat track racing, obviously, but you know, it's the flat bars, the big engine, the gruntiness. They do look a bit like scramblers, but there's no off-road pretense really, other than being on a flat track. I think they look great, and I'm looking forward to other manufacturers bringing out flat tracker bikes. What's the betting try and bring one out? We've not seen any spy shots or heard any rumours, but surely they must bring out a flat tracker in the next 24 months. We'll wait and see. But this Indian looks beautiful. 14,000 quid. And MCN verdict, haven't given it a star rating yet. Basically, a flat track inspired street hooligan, not for the faint-hearted or inexperienced, is what Neevesy says on this bike. So a bit of a beast by all accounts, but I think it looks lovely, and I can't wait to see more manufacturers bring flat trackers on. When, you know, the recent bike shed show that I didn't go to, but I saw lots of pictures from it, lots of flat tracker inspired bikes there. If you're watching social media as I do on the bike front, then lots of flat tracker custom bikes out there at the moment. It seems to be, to me, maybe the next trend. Do you agree? Or is there something else that's coming on? Certainly not going to be three-wheeled bikes, I don't think. Anyway, there we go. So that was part one of bike news. Hope you found that of interest, and if you agree or disagree with some of my stories, that would be interested to know in the comments. Do let me know below. As I say, part two coming along. I'm recording this on Wednesday. I'll post it up on Thursday morning. Part two I'll record now, and I'll be posting that up on Saturday morning as well. So stay tuned to the channel. Not only in part two will I go through these couple of papers, but I'll also give you some news about what's coming up on the Mist and Fly soon. So hopefully that'll be worth seeing. All right, that's it for now. Look forward to speaking to you again soon. Till then, this has been the Mist and Fly. Cheerio.